Okay, so you know how sometimes relationship advice can be, well, a little overwhelming.
Yeah, for sure.
We're tackling a source today called 18 Costly Mistakes That Husbands Make.
Ooh, that title, right? Straight to the point.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this direct approach and see what we can all learn about building a strong marriage.
One of the first things that jumped out at me was how it talks about the husband's role, like being a leader in the marriage. It even compared it to, get this, leadership in business.
Okay, so I can already see how that comparison could be a little much for some people.
Right.
But the idea of actively leading, like putting in the effort to make the relationship great instead of just hoping for the best, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. It's that conscious choice to invest your time and energy. And that kind of leads into this whole idea of, well, the source calls it emotional cheating. Like, even if it doesn't get physical, flirting outside the marriage is a no-go.
And they really don't hold back either. Like, if you're a flirt, flirt with your wife.
Haha, right.
It's blunt, but you get the message.
Yeah, and I think what's important there is how it highlights that emotional intimacy, that feeling of being understood, truly valued by your partner. When you seek that outside the marriage, even in small ways, it can really hurt what you've built together.
And it's not about grand gestures or showering your partner with gifts either, which is interesting because the source talks about that too. It's more about those everyday moments, being present, understanding.
So true.
Like coming home from work and really wanting to know what your partner's going through that day. Not just a quick, how was your day? And that's it.
Such a good example. It's about being there both physically and emotionally. And that actually connects to the next thing the source emphasized, this idea of boosting your wife's self-esteem. Just think about the impact of constantly feeling affirmed, appreciated in a relationship.
It's like, taking care of a plant. Those consistent acts of love, appreciation, it helps everything grow and thrive.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, if you neglect that.
Yeah, things start to wilt.
Exactly. And it's not always about compliments, though those are great too. It's about actually being a part of your partner's life. Their passions, celebrating their successes, all of it.
Being their biggest fan.
Yes. And you know what else I thought was really important? The source got real about financial responsibility.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not about being a tightwad. It's about being on the same page with your values, your goals, and making choices together.
Yeah, because let's face it, financial stress can really hurt a marriage. The source even specifically called out wasting money on meaningless things. And it made me wonder, what does that even look like in a relationship,
That's a great question. What is that? Is it impulse buys? One person racking up secret credit card debt?
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about those conversations that can be tough but are so important to have.
For sure. Transparency, being open about money, that's key. And speaking of conversations that might be difficult, the source also goes into this whole thing with pornography.
So it feels like this source is really getting at some of those like unspoken topics, like this whole thing with pornography. It basically says it's a form of cheating.
Yeah.
Because it's, those desires, but directed outside of the marriage.
Yeah, and that might be true for some people, for sure. But I also think it's really important to remember that different couples are going to have different boundaries, different things they're okay with.
Totally. It's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Right.
It's really about two people figuring out what feels healthy for their relationship, what feels safe, and maybe messed up.
Right.
But the source, it frames it as a strength, not a weakness.
I like that.
Because when you can own your mistakes and apologize, that builds trust. It helps you grow.
And isn't that what a strong relationship is all about? Being able to go through those challenges together, you learn from each other, and you come out stronger because of it. And this idea of learning, growing together, I think that really comes into play with, well, the source talks about spiritual leadership.
Okay, so we're not just talking about finances and decision-making now, but also like sharing your faith, your values. What does that even look like, practically speaking?
Well, the source talks about how it's not about one person dictating what everyone else believes. It's more about creating an environment where faith can grow, like through prayer, open conversations, setting a good example for your kids.
Walking the walk.
Yes, exactly.
Not just talking the talk.
Yes. And on a slightly more lighthearted note, the source also talks about leaving those CEO vibes at work,
Oh, I see what you mean.
Like recognizing that, those skills, that whole demeanor you might need in the office, it doesn't always work so well at home.
Right.
It's about creating that space where you can both really unwind, connect as partners and parents.
Because let's be real, when those bumps in the road come up, and they will, you want to be on the same team. Not like two ships passing in the night,
Oh, no.
And the source talks about how important it is to be open and honest with each other.
Yeah.
Even when it's about those failures or setbacks.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. Because when you try to hide things, it usually backfires anyway. It creates more distance.
Right.
It's that vulnerability, that honesty that really strengthens the bond.
It's like that saying, we're stronger together than we are alone.
Yes.
And that also means, like, standing strong against what other people think, what they expect from you, which the source gets into next.
It's so easy to get caught up in that, like what your friends think, what your families expect of you. But what the source really emphasizes is that your primary commitment is to each other, right? To building that strong foundation for your family.
Owning your choices.
Yeah.
And your commitment.
Yes.
To the marriage. And speaking of choices, I think it's time we talked about something that often gets kind of swept under the rug, even in conversations about marriage.
What's that?
Intimacy. Yeah, intimacy. It's so important. And this source, it doesn't shy away from it at all.
What's interesting to me is how much it focuses on mutual fulfillment.
Right.
And I don't just mean like the physical part. It's about really getting your partner's emotional needs in the bedroom too.
Oh, totally. It even says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it basically says husbands need to make sure their wife, feels satisfied.
Yeah.
That she feels desired.
Yeah, they get pretty direct about it. But I think the point is, it's okay to be direct about that stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, it's really important to have that open communication when it comes to intimacy. To feel safe saying what you need, what you want.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. It takes guts to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
But just imagine how much stronger your bond can be when you both feel heard.
Oh, yeah.
Cherished, Not just in the bedroom, but like all the time. And this whole thing about shared responsibility, about being on the same team, well, it applies to parenting too, which is another big thing the source talks about.
It really is. From those first days when you find out you're going to be parents, all the way through those crazy teenage years and beyond. It's about being true partners in raising a family.
Being present, engaged, really involved in your kids' lives.
Yes.
Not just, here, you handle that, honey.
Right, exactly.
It's about making decisions together, being supportive, showing your kids what a united front really looks like.
Love that united front, especially when you think about, all the
work for your relationship.
That's a challenge.
It is. You have to figure out what feels authentic to you, to your partner. Exactly. There's no one right answer for everyone.
Yeah.
But when you're open to learning and growing, when you really talk to each other, that's how you build something strong, something fulfilling.
That's a great place to wrap up, I think. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Absolutely. It's been fun.
And to everyone listening, we'll see you next time for another deep dive.